It's 6 o'clock. If you could all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we're at West Rutland School. It is November 18th. The first matter of business would be the approval of the agenda. And if there's no objection, I'd like to move the finance number 8 to the top so we could discuss the budget. And then if principals want to leave, they could leave.
You want to move what?
Number 8.
Got it.
And discuss the budget. And then we'll go back and follow the order of the agenda.
Sounds good.
Yep. Lisa?
I just had the brief update for everybody on the efficiency rating task force.
Okay. Is that under just the consent agenda?
Wherever you want to put it.
Okay.
Old business?
Sure.
Yeah, I know.
All right. With those changes, a motion would be in order.
I move that we approve the agenda with the suggested changes.
And second?
I second.
So motion by Kristen Ross, second by Jim Mumford. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. General public, we don't have any general public. We invited our teams tonight, but due to weather, they're not coming. So we extend our congratulations to the Poultney football team and the Proctor ladies soccer team for their state championships. It's exciting to have 2 in Quarry Valley.
I think we wanted to invite them in December, though. It was just because of the weather.
Sure.
Yes.
And we're happy to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Am I taking notes?
No,
Because-
we're recording.
Okay.
No, you may want to take notes because it's not working
Okay,
properly.
I just realized, I just looked around and I didn't hear any keyboards going, so.
Oh, well, it is on page
Sorry,
TV,
Kristen.
so,
No, that's okay.
all right.
I'll
Is it
keep
voice
working.
activated?
No, because it's been going, but every time it just will stop.
So Louis, if you would like to start us with the budget, walk us through it, tell us what we need.
Okay, so the packet, or the budget was in the packet. It was approximately 17 pages long. But I'll focus on just a few of the summaries first, and then if there's questions, we can go to some of the details. So the first page was a summary of changes. That takes what our budget was last year, and it highlights some of the major things that's affecting our budget to see why we're up or down, or just even status quo, things that don't have, maybe not have a financial impact, but just are a footnote. And then the other summary that I'll point out was at the end of the packet, and that was a location summary. And that takes the budget increases per school, and it breaks it out into several different categories, including salaries, health insurance, and it just breaks down the increases by school into the different pieces so that you can kind of get a sense as to what's causing the budget to be up. And I also included a little pie chart that shows you for each one of those percentages, what percentage of the whole they are. So looking at the summary of changes, for those of you that are new to the budget process, our budget is broken down into different sections. The first major section is by location. So we have five locations, one for each school. And then the 6th location is district-wide, and those would be expenses that are affecting all of the schools, such as transportation is under district-wide, vocational transportation, Board of Ed, fiscal services, stuff like that. So that's the first thing that's broken down under. And then the next level of separation is function code. So under your school, under each school, you'll notice there's a direct instruction, which is mostly your teachers. And then there's a library section, guidance, principal's office, technology, and so forth. And then within each of those functions, you have even further detail based on the different object code is what it's called, and that would be salaries, benefits, supplies, dues and fees, and all the different types of expenses you have for each section. Any questions before I go on even further? Okay. So looking at the district-wide budget, some of the changes, there was a change in the IEP services for preschool students that we've talked about at the SU board meetings.
I'm sorry, Louis, could you tell us what page you're on so that?
Page 1.
That-
The
that's-
summary
The
of
very
changes.
beginning, okay, gotcha.
So last year, we made a change to hire a preschool IEP case manager. It was hired out of SU special ed funds, and that position is managing the IEP students in the preschool programs across the SU. And we talked about at the SU meeting how we're increasing that to 2 positions, one for the north and one for the south, to have less traveling, have more student contact time. That change resulted in your preschool teachers at your local levels having to spend less time case managing IEP students and more time just doing direct instruction for all students. And because of that switch, we removed all of the preschool expense for your teachers and your IAs back to the local budget. So none of that is now at the special ed. The only thing that's at the SU level is the case management of the IEP students. And that's partially being funded out of federal grant funds. So that did result in increase in salaries and benefits at your local level for preschool staffing, but there was also an offset to that under purchase service in that same section. So if you look at one of the examples, would be on page 3. Halfway down the page, Pulteney Elementary Preschool, you have an increase in staffing and benefits, but then you have a SU purchase service, which is now at a 0 budget, which is resulting in savings. And it didn't affect all schools differently because Rutland Southwest schools handle preschool differently than Rutland Central schools. So probably West Rutland and Proctor Elementaries would be a better example of those. We can look at those more closely later. But that was just a shift mainly. We also did have some preschool grants the last few years that have phased out, which did result in some increased preschool costs hitting the local budget. The next thing, health insurance increases. We're estimating 12.9% increase. That's what we've been told by VHI for next year. That's resulting in an increase of cost of $173,000 approximately. There's some staffing salary increases built into this budget. We can discuss those more in executive session, and I do have some more handouts for executive session around personnel. That 4th item, that actually did get cut off. It says assessment there, but this was a shift that was discussed at the SU meeting. We've moved some of the items that are SU-wide, such as the MAPS program, jump rope, Alpine, Infinite Campus. They're SU-wide programs that all schools are using, and rather than those being in each individual school budget and showing up on the different codes, we've moved all of that expense to the SU budget, which is increasing your assessment for those pieces, and it's roughly about $50,000. Some of it's being covered by grant funds. And so in the local budgets, those expenses are coming out. So you'll see some like dues and fees lines on the guidance where that has now been moved to 0 because that expense no longer exists at the local level. It's part of the SU budget. There's some increase to repairs lines built into the budgets. That's going to be under district-wide, and we can go into those with a little bit more detail, but the goal is to have repairs lines that are large enough to keep up with the repairs on an annual basis so that we don't get into an issue where we're having to go out to bond every 10-year for deferred repairs. Keeping up with it keeps our building in better shapes and prolongs the life of them. There's some very minimal, but and in the grand scheme of things, as far as the cost of our budget, minimal impact, but there's some QV athletic money in here to cover Quarry Valley sports. Like this year, we've talked about the bass fishing that we've added. And so the thought is as we add some of those more Quarry Valley sports, there's money for transportation, coaching, supplies. And then transportation cost is up due to the rebidding of the contract last year. We were able to spread some of that cost over a few years, but we are seeing an increase in costs for this year. And we do get some money back as transportation aid from the state, but there is a lag. So our cost for last year will determine our transportation revenue for next year. So this is the first year under the new contract, so we won't see that increase in revenue until the 2022 budget. Moving on to the local schools, Pulteney Elementary School, there was some Medicaid funding that was funding a half-time of our nurse position. That Medicaid funding has now diminished, so that has been moved to the local budget. And in addition, the after-school program was funded out of Medicaid, and that funding has also gone away, so we have added that to the local budget. In Proctor and West Rutland, we have the Tapestry program, which is a federal funded program that's actually sub-granted to us from Rutland City. In Pulteney, we don't currently have that program. It's all been funded either locally or through local grant funds. We have looked into adding the southern schools to that Tapestry program, but we have to wait to the next cycle, and I believe they're 5-year cycles. I think we're only currently in year 2 of that cycle. Pulteney High School, a similar moving of grant funding. We had some Medicaid funding that was funding part of our counselor position for this year, so that's going away. All of the Medicaid funding is now coming to the SU and funding SU initiatives. It's funding a portion of a lot of our central office positions, lowering your assessment. There's currently 1 teacher retirement that's built into this budget, but it is currently budgeted as being replaced. No material changes in Proctor Elementary or Proctor High School.
So can I just say, based on what's in our packet, wouldn't there be 2 retirements for this budget?
There's actually several retirements that we received, that I just received
Okay.
today,
Okay.
that are not included in this. I think there's
Okay.
a total of 5. Only 1 is built into this budget so
Okay.
far, because
Thank
this was
you.
prepared as of last week. And there may be others also. The deadline was November 15th for teachers to receive the retirement benefit. So a bunch of them came in towards the end of the week there.
Okay.
At West Rutland School, there was just a shift in the co-curricular money, moved from direct instruction of the wages to its own section. And then there was a 0.5 FTE interventionist position, which was in the budget but was never hired, and so that has not been included in this budget. I want you to ignore the bottom section for now. So the next thing is the detail for each of the schools, and it goes into detail by line. And I'm not gonna focus on any of that detail unless there's specific questions, but I'll just point out a few things. So anything that you see that's highlighted in green, things that are still pending. So some of those things are tech center revenue, tech center expense. We have not got that's based on a 6-semester rolling average. We have not got that information from the state yet, so that's still pending. Also, communication lines are still pending. We're waiting for a recap from our provider to give us an estimate of next year's expenses. And so I'll update that for next meeting. And then on page 15, I have repairs lines and fuel lines also highlighted in green. I'd like to come back and take another closer look at those over the next month. I know going back and forth a little bit on page 2, I just point out is the top of page 2, that's our revenue that we receive. So a few things I want to point out there. I am estimating that our tuition revenue is going to be up. I'm estimating about $115,000 over this year, and that's keeping our rates, our announced tuition rates at the current level, which is $13,500 for elementary and 17,000 for high school. At the next meeting, I'll be providing a proposal for announced tuition rates for next year, and at the December meeting, we'll be looking to approve those.
And what are we basing that revenue on for next year? Are those students currently in our buildings?
It's based on students that are in our buildings plus an estimate for the incoming 7th grade class. And I looked at by town that we get those students from and estimated what percentage of those students have come to one of our schools in the past and just applied that same percentage. So for example, like approximately say 50% of Wells students comes to Poultney, so I use that same percentage based on their 6th grade class.
Okay, thank you.
I know when we looked at the forecast earlier this year, we looked at just staffing, but one of the other big things that affects our budget is tuition, and our tuition revenue for this year is also up versus our budget, so that'll be good news when we look at our local budgets, and I'll provide an estimate, an updated forecast at a future meeting. The other thing that I want to point out on the revenue, which is on the negative side, is in FY20 on the budget, we used $180,000 surplus. That's revenue that we're giving back to the taxpayers for a surplus that we had the prior year. There's actually a 1-year lag. So in FY20 it was an FY18 surplus. For FY21, we're looking at FY19 surplus, and we only ended the year with $6,000 in surplus funds. So that is a decrease in revenue, which it doesn't affect our expense, but it affects our total education spending. And we'll talk a little bit more about education spending and expense next month. I think this month we'll just focus on expense. So I'll take you now to the last page. So you should be looking at something that has a pie chart. Do I have that?
Mm-hmm.
So this takes the budget and breaks it down into the different major categories by school. So right now, our total budget expense is up by $1.1 million, which is 6.31%. And I've broken that into the different categories of salaries, health, insurance, Kelly subs, by school. So we can kind of look at some of these things we have control over. Health insurance we don't have any control over. That's employees pick the plans that they choose, and we're told how much that's going to increase for next year. Kelly subs, just based on looking at actuals and increasing our budgets so that we're more in line with actuals based on staff out of the building. SU billbacks and assessment, that's two different pieces. So under the schools, it's the billbacks. Those are for SU positions that are they're contracted at the SU, but then it's billed back. So some of the examples of that is for special ed paras and teachers. We bill back a portion of their time that we estimate will be ineligible for special ed. So for paras, we use an estimated 15% of their day is ineligible for special ed because they're either working with regular ed students or they're doing lunch duties or recess duties, and that becomes a local expense for that school. So we do 15% for paras, we do 5% for special ed teachers. And then if there's any other positions that are partially grant funded, so let's say we have a reading interventionist that is funded partially through federal grants, we'll contract them at the SU and we'll bill back a portion of their salary to the district, the portion that's not federally funded. And then other is every other expense that's left after you take those four major categories out.
Louis, question there's a significant negative amount in the other for West Rutland, but there's
Yep.
also a significant salary increase. Are they in any way, shape, or form tied together?
So what that's showing is that, so West Rutland, the average increase is 6.31 across the district, but West Rutland's increase is only 98,000, which is 2.48%. So if you take out the salary increases and the health increases, their budget's actually down. That's why that's showing as a negative number.
But are there some insights into why the salary increase is so much out of line with the other locations? And maybe some insight into what the,
They're a K-12, so that they have more staff in their buildings than any other school.
okay.
So like if you looked at Polteny Elementary and Polteny High School together, it'd be more in line with West Rutland's salary increases and health insurance increases, and same thing with Proctor's.
Sure, but not really focusing on dollars, though. If we focus on the
Percentage?
percentages, I mean, that's a major significant.
It's looking at that as a percentage of the whole, so their total increase is only 98,000, and so the salary increases is 86% of that.
Okay.
It's all based on their total increase, and because their budget is actually down compared to once you pull those pieces out, that's why it's kind of offsetting those numbers. Their numbers are looking a little different than everybody, all the other schools, because when you pull those things out, the other schools are still up. Proctor's down slightly if you pull out those other pieces. They're down $4,000.
And just really quick, back on the other, for the expenses, that's a pretty significant savings showing there. Is there any one, like a particular item that's leading that, or
For
just
West
you're doing a
Rutland.
good job here and you're,
So on the summary of changes, there was that halftime position that was cut in West Rutland.
Okay.
There was also some one-time increases in West Rutland. There was some furniture purchases, and those have come out of this budget, at least partially. For some of them, they may be fully out or partially out.
and the interventionist falls in expense, other
It
expenses?
would fall into other, yeah.
Yep, okay, makes sense. Thank you. Just, sorry, one more question.
If
Christie,
there's, no,
before you
that's, so I'll open it up to now questions. I don't think we want to go through the 17 pages in detail, so if there's any specific questions, I'll take those, and then we can talk about plan going forward.
go. One more from my side, that should be it.
Yeah.
Christie, your Kelly subs line is much lower than the rest?
So for Proctor, that's not the total subline, that's just the increase. So her actuals were
Okay.
more in line with her budget, and so she didn't need to have as large of an increase.
Perfect, thank you.
Properly budgeted,
Yeah.
or properly estimated, maybe. Or yeah.
So can I make a suggestion for the budget, since I don't know how many people read through it online. Sometimes it's a lot easier once you come and receive the packet to look through and flip back through the pages to review. And there are lots of items in here that are pending. It's not as if tonight we're going to make any kind of substantive changes to the budget. I would recommend going home, reading through it, highlighting, putting your questions together to come back. My suggestion would be to have a special meeting the first week of December just to discuss the budget. It's up $1 million. And we talked about this last year when we increased the budget. And I think everyone at the table realizes that we cannot grow on a annual basis at $1 million, or someone's not gonna be in their building. That's just the realistic answer to what we have for students, communities, income, and being able to pass the budget on the first time. And I think that's something that we all want to be able to do. There's no advantage to any of those of us who have been through and not passed a budget and had to have gone back. It's not a fun process. So if there aren't any substantive questions, I would recommend taking the budget home, reading through it, highlighting, and at the end of the meeting, if everyone has their calendar with them, perhaps we could pick the first week of December to meet.
I'd like just two things.
Sure.
One, I think it's important tonight that we leave with some sort of direction that the board wants us to go in, so that we're not sitting idle for the next 2 weeks waiting to give this budget some thought as to what direction we need to go in and how much we need to cut, or where we need to cut. Secondly, with next week being a shortened week, there's not a lot of time for the principals and us to meet and come up with some plans.
Right.
And we also don't have a lot of information from the state at this point with equalized pupils, CLA, tax rates. I think it would be more beneficial to have an extra meeting in January when we have all of that information. We have a shortened month with the holidays for both November and December. And I think it would be a lot more productive if you gave us a direction tonight that you'd like us to move in, and so that I could meet with the principals over the next few weeks, come back to the December meeting with some proposals, and then, based on that, maybe plan an extra meeting for the beginning of January, so that we can vet through those proposals over the course of the next few meetings.
When do you think that you're going to have that information from the state?
Not before December 15th.
Okay.
And I think the best direction that we could give you this evening, which is going to be fairly surfacey, is to cut X amount. I mean, I don't think we're at a point going through the budget this evening, and we're sitting with multiple people at the table who it's their very first time going through this budget process, to be able to tell you particular areas that we think need to be reduced. So, I mean, collectively as a board, if the board wants to say it's at $1 million and we want you to cut X, but without having the information from the state, as we know, sometimes it's just a matter of a shell game, what those dollars look like and the tax rate.
I think that's what we would be looking for, a number or a percentage. I mean, the buildings, or the principals know their buildings best as to what they need and what they can maybe squeak by without. So I would think that the where to cut should come from the principal's perspective first.
And that's fine.
And so, but we need a direction as to at least a percentage or a dollar amount target, so that they know how far down the line they need to go. And maybe we give even one or two different scenarios, but at least some feedback from you as to some benchmarks that we need to make would do a lot of good for us.
I would echo exactly what Lisa just got through saying, that the budget is on an unsustainable growth path, and I would like to see 500,000 cut from this budget. I mean, it's a big number, but it's getting out of control. I guess we all have to realize that, and we have to cut it. There's no way we're going to be able to do this every single year. Somebody's going to have to close their schools or whatever, but it can't happen. So I'm saying cut 500,000. That's my recommendation.
Other?
I would agree with that. That's not saying that we're definitely going to cut 500,000, but if you're looking for a direction.
It's a big number, but we have to really take some drastic steps here. I mean, last year, we did, I thought what was necessary at the time, and now we're fully staffed, and everybody seems to have the staff that they need to run their schools efficiently, and now it's time to cut it down to the bone, so to speak, and it's just, this $1 million every year is not gonna fly with the communities, you know? And everybody knows that.
Save money with
Right.
the merger.
Right, we're not saving money. The merger is not really saving us. So, well,
So would the board be comfortable with giving that as a directive to cut 500,000 and allow them, Lewis and the principals, to meet and come back with a couple different narratives? This is what 500,000 looks like, maybe this is what,
400,000 looks
400.
like.
600?
Do a priority list. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
now that
Right.
we have a sense as to where we need to be, we can do it based on our priorities, and this is what we do for this amount and this amount.
And then I would be very interested in not only what you can do with that amount, but what we're gonna lose with that amount.
and what was the healthcare increase last year? It was like,
10.8, oh no, 11.8.
So similar.
we almost need to look at some other way to provide health insurance to our employees. I mean, 12% or 10% every year is unrealistic.
So unfortunately, that's even going out of our control even further,
State's
because
gonna-
as
State's
of
gonna
next
take it over.
January, we're all moving to the statewide plan. Through statute, they are coming up with a statewide health insurance plan that all employees have to go on, and you don't have an option. And so that's currently in negotiations between the board, the state board representatives and the state union representatives, and we should have more information on that by next December, or not next December,
So,
next month.
Louis, if you take 5 that we give you in the middle and go 4 on one side and 6 on the other and give us those options, if you come back with this like you have in the past with the summary of changes, what those reductions look like for each number, I think that would be helpful.
That would be helpful to
Particularly
me.
for new board members.
Okay. And the other
Alright.
thing that I've done in at least last year with the budget is, rather than, so that we don't lose all of the history, I've added a separate column for first draft, second draft, so
Yeah.
your first draft information will stay on here. And there'll
Nice.
just be a new column with the second draft, so you can see each change from
Absolutely.
each draft. It does get a little bit smaller as we
The
move
font
forward
gets
because we have
smaller and
extra
That's
columns.
okay.
Right.
We could turn it sideways if we need to keep it
No, I think
size.
that worked well last year, so
Yeah.
I think that's fine. Okay?
Any other questions? And if there's questions that you think of after the meeting, and feel free to send me an email or give me a call if you want a little bit more attention, you want me to walk you through how the process works. I could meet with you individually or talk to you on the phone, so that you're up to speed with for the next budget discussion.
I have a question for all of principals and for you in terms of how you, I know we go kind of just 2 or 1 year out depending on what cycle we're in, but what about sort of 10 years out for how many high school students we're going to have in the state of Vermont? Are we looking at that far out in terms of budgets? I know in higher ed, it's not looking good for high schoolers coming into either, homegrown high schoolers or other folks coming in for colleges. So,
I mean, statewide, I think they were talking between a 1% and 2% decrease in enrollment each year. I mean, we're not necessarily seeing that in all of our schools. Some schools are seeing increases, actually, and
Yeah.
some maybe slight decreases. Definitely, we're down over a number of years,
Right,
but
yeah, that's
lately,
what I
the
think
last
I
few
was-
years, we've actually been up.
yeah.
And I think at the ADM that we looked at, ADM is our average daily membership, which is a count of students during the first 20 days of the school year. And we're actually up SU-wide over, I think, July.
So, and I don't know the best way to get at this, but how do we look at larger, longer trends? Or do we, should we? I mean, I just think it's something in terms of building closures and investments in which buildings we're gonna make. It's not necessarily something for this budget to this time around, but it's just something that's happening in all of New England
I don't think we're
states,
looking that
so.
far out.
Well, a NESDEC is the New England School Development Council.
Mhm.
They do enrollment reports. They're pretty much based on what your enrollments are now, but I think sometimes we could contract with them to see if they'll do a more detailed enrollment report
We
over time.
can't afford it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I
I
can
just
look into
wondered
it and
if-
see how much it costs.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a huge.
And I'm not saying this year, I'm just thinking like, the
A 5-year
Vermont State
plan.
Colleges, the news is not good, so that
But I
can't
think
mean
that the
great things.
decline in the public school population has now hit the colleges, and the public school population has kind of leveled off, because
Hope so.
that's been happening over the last 20 years, and now we're seeing that it's not declining as sharply as it did. We're down to that low point that they had predicted 20 years ago.
And Louis, do we know how many tuition students we need to have in a bus to make a bus viable? So with Black River closing, that seems like a natural transition for this school or even Proctor to be thinking about sending a bus to, say, Mount Holly. Is that something that we have said we need 7 students?
Based on the last, when we rebid the contract, we're paying $35,000, I believe, per bus this year.
Mhm. So we'd need,
It's only a
4
little over
students.
2 students.
yeah. Okay.
So I know, like, I think last year, maybe it was the year before, we looked at the bus that Pulteney sends to Wells to pick up students there.
Right.
Well worth the cost.
Absolutely.
And that bus actually isn't costing us as much because it's part of an existing run. But just based on the number of students, it's well worth it
Okay.
at $17,000 each.
And I think when we, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just talking, we had decreased a bus in Potley a few years back. We had 5, now we have 4.
And I just think the other piece we need to think about collectively is some level of advertising for Quarry Valley. There's lots of fabulous things happening in every single building, whether it's from academics to athletics to music. And I'm not always sure that each school is receiving the recognition that they so deserve. And those are the simple kind of things that make people that have choice look at schools and consider them. And I think we need to do a better job of promoting ourselves. And, you know, I'm not really sure how we want to go about doing that, but I think that's something that we seriously need to task and think about in order to make ourselves viable. So, all right, so that's our direction, 4, 5, and 6. Thank you, Louis. All right, we'll jump back up to old business, and we'll let Lisa give her presentation or report under that.
Great, well, I know that you're all trying to get out of here a little early with the weather, so I'll be brief. But in your packet, there was just a working draft of a task force work plan. So there have been lots of conversations in the Quarry Valley schools and also in particular in Rutland Town around what grading and transcripts look like now that we've shifted officially to this proficiency-based model across all of our schools. So we're having lots and lots of conversations at the school level about that. We wanted to form a task force to really look at that issue at an SU level, again, trying to build more consistency across our programs and continue the work of unification, getting everybody on the same page. But really primarily with the new proficiency-based graduation requirement deadline, we want to make sure that we're doing right by our students and that we have the best tools, resources and systems in place to represent them well as they go on to college and career readiness. So we're starting a task force to really study that issue, both looking at what we're doing within our district and also what other districts across the state are doing for grading and transcripts. And I just wanted to let everyone first know that that's happening and also just give you guys an opportunity if there are specific questions or concerns or ideas that you would like to have guide this task force as we begin framing this work, then please let me know either tonight or you can always reach out to me by email or by phone to have
Do you
a
have your
lengthy
email on here?
I'm sorry?
I don't see an email on here.
I don't, but I can make sure that it gets out to everybody.
Okay.
So I would say one of the biggest ongoing conversations about proficiency in grades, this is a conversation we had when Adam was still here, and in Proctor, we switched from the 100-point scale to, I guess, word grades, and now we're on the number scale. And now we're on the number scale, point number scale. We were on a whole number scale, and now we're on that. I think the biggest piece that has been missing from change to change to change is communication with the true stakeholders, and those are parents and the students, and what these differences mean. And a question that constantly comes up is, you know, what is proficient? Is 2.9 proficient or is 2.6 proficient? And if my child has ended the semester and was proficient and had a 3.4, and now suddenly they have a 2.8, how are we explaining that to parents? Because parents that I've heard from say, well, my child is at a 3.4, and now all of a sudden they're at a 2.8. What happened to that knowledge, skill set that they had? You know, there's no recognition of that. So there's no, in the old system, you had individual quarter grades, so if they had a 3.8, that or would be a stagnant 3.8 under first semester, second semester. Now we say it's cumulative. So if they do spectacular first semester and all of a sudden something comes up and they struggle, suddenly they're not proficient.
Well, are they testing something different? Is it a different proficiency?
Absolutely, but we say that we're testing proficiencies over and over and over. So, and it's not broken out necessarily on jump rope in that manner. So I just think that there is a communication piece that's missing with how this is being shared with parents. And I know a lot of schools, and I know this was a conversation also, and I think, it's my understanding Rutland does this, I think there's some schools up north, that even though you're on the 1 to 4 scale, you can have in parentheses that that's an A minus, a B minus, a B, or something like that. And I know there was communication or conversation with Adam about that as a possibility, and thinking maybe that helped with the communication piece to parents being able to understand a little more what that looks like. And then with respect to what are we looking at as a timeline here for having a finalized, say, transcript?
So we have working transcripts already in all of our schools, so they're able to produce them. So this would be looking at either developing one that's really consistent across all of our schools, and or revising and refining what we have in place to try and do an even better job for the upcoming school year.
Looks like your last date is May 2020. Does that mean that the work will be done maybe by the end of this year and that it'll go into use the following year?
Yeah, our goal would be that if there are changes or adjustments that we want to make to what schools currently have, that we would have those in place for the fall.
Can I ask a question? The focus group is made up of the community members, and am I reading it correctly that that wouldn't include elementary parents?
Yeah, so at this time, we're planning to do focus groups with our 3 high schools and also Rutland Town, because those are the schools that have students at grade levels where that transcript and reporting to external agencies for high school placement is really important. Students who are leaving 6th grade, in Wells and Middletown Springs, who are going by choice to a school in 7th and 8th grade, they've been doing just fine with the standard school report cards. Those schools are used to taking students with that kind of information, so a little bit less pressing. But we're going to survey all of the schools so that we do get feedback from those groups. And if we find that there's a reason to have a focus group in those areas, we might add them. But right now, we feel like we know that we need to have these conversations at these schools, so that's where we want it to start.
So 7 through 12.
I was going to say, you said high schools, but you're talking middle
Yes.
schools
Well,
as
Rutland
well.
Town has 7
7
and
through
8.
12.
That's why it occurred to me. When she said high school, I thought 9 through 12.
Yeah,
Sorry.
7 through 12.
Junior, senior high schools.
Seth, you look like you have something to say.
I think I'm okay, actually.
Okay.
Well, if not, I'll make sure that everybody has my email and my phone. I'm happy to have conversations more in depth with people, because I know that this is something that folks have wrestled with a lot as we've made this transition. And
Can you just give us your email now? We can
Sure,
write it down.
absolutely. It is Lisa, Lisa, .Mattison, MATTISON, @grcsu.org.
And I think it would be helpful if we just had little blurb updates as you're moving along also. Not necessarily that you have to come and give a report, but just, what you found, kind of what you're looking at, bullet points that you're pulling out of your meetings, I think would be helpful to keep the board just kind of in the loop.
Great.
Could that be like just basically an assistant superintendent report?
Sure.
And then it's like for your review?
Yeah, oh, absolutely,
That would
just
work.
informational. Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other old business? Does anyone have any new business? The consent agenda, if everyone's reviewed the minutes, a motion to accept the consent agenda of the warrants. And you've had principals' reports to review. If there are, do any principals have any particular things they would like to add? Just trying to keep things moving tonight, because I
Yes,
know
thank
people
you.
are
I
concerned
appreciate
about
that.
the weather. Was there anything you wanted to highlight, Judy, or?
I think the only thing I would very quickly highlight is, the administrative team meets monthly, as you know. And one of the things that we are working on is, increasing the understanding of the group of the district management training that we all attend. They had a really good one in October, and it was basically about prioritizing initiatives and looking at that. And so we are trying to prioritize initiatives that we can work on as a group, down to three to five, so we can really focus on what's important. And along with that is, the task force and things like that. So we're trying to start really moving some things along, like some procedures. There's a task force for that. I want to start working a little bit on policy, if I can squeeze that in with everything else. But just kind of get things moving and move along with those initiatives that we have on board. So that's
Sounds good.
That's my quick update.
All right, so with that, motion would be on order to approve the consent agenda.
So moved?
Second,
I second it.
so moved by Kristen, seconded by Gail. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. In your packet, under personnel, we have one retirement in the packet. So a motion would be in order to accept the retirement for Claire Molnar, who is the nurse at Proctor High School.
I will make a motion to accept the retirement of Claire Moore.
Second?
I'll second.
So, motion by Kristen, seconded by Kristen.
KWKR, I got it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And contract recommendations. Are there any questions on the contract recommendations that are, does everyone have the
I did
most?
pass these out. Did everyone get one?
Yes.
Yeah, can I just say there is one mistake on here?
Sure.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, fourth from the bottom, Melissa Guay, that should read West Rutland School, 5th grade boys basketball.
Okay.
And I don't know how you guys do it here. We just interviewed somebody for a JV girls position. I wasn't in the office today, but I do have just got the worksheet done this morning. Sometimes it was just okay to start and then get the contract signed at the next board meeting type thing, but.
Yeah, I think that's kind of historically
I
what
even
we've
talked to
done.
Judy about that. I just,
Yeah, and that's
coming
fine.
up,
So it'll just come to the next,
Yeah,
to the December
yeah.
meeting.
For Proctor Elementary School, at this time, we have no coach for boys or girls for 5th or 6th grade.
Okay, and have those positions been advertised? Okay,
We
so would you like to make a
leave.
a plead for parents if they want their children to play?
It's a nice long season.
What grade are you needing?
5th and 6th grade boys and girls.
And they're together?
Nope.
No.
So there's 4 teams.
No.
No, 2, a boys team, 5th and 6th.
Okay,
girls
so
team.
fifth, that's what I meant, 5th and 6th
Basketball,
is
right?
together.
Basketball, yes.
Gotcha, thank
Yeah.
you.
Have we reached out to Castleton to
Yes.
see, oh, we have?
Yep.
Okay, and they're not interested this year?
And it's tough, it
Sometimes
is
hit
a
or
long
miss.
season.
Yep.
Yeah,
You
It's
know,
tough
it's
with kids at school.
longer than a varsity season and
right. Okay,
based on that.
well, it's out there, so parents, if you have a child, contact Christy, so
You can keep that.
you can have a team. All right, if there are no other questions or changes, a motion would be in order for the contract recommendations as presented with the one change from West Rutland fifth grade girls to boys basketball.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
motion by Gail, second by Jim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Vacancies. Are there vacancies, or that's just on there? The new hire change list, is
Well,
this
you can
just
see the dates on
information?
This is just an update for
Informational?
you. Informational only. Just
Okay.
an update. She does it every month.
This one
Okay.
you were talking about, right?
Yeah, just informational. All right, under finance, we need to approve the title sub-grant. Do you want to talk about that, Louis?
Sure. So all of the federal funds are received by the supervisory union, and occasionally, those federal funds will be sub-granted to one of the districts so that they could be spent at the district level rather than the SU level, in which case we would need to do a sub-grant agreement, which is what we're looking to approve tonight. And so for this particular one, it's a carryover from Rutland Southwest. Polteny Elementary School has a title interventionist who is funded out of title funds at 75% of their salary and benefits. And so what we've done is any new positions are funded through the SU directly, so we don't have to do the sub-grant the funds, but this position has been grandfathered to be sub-granted, and we're leaving that until either the funds are no longer available or until that position is replaced. And so the SU is sub-granting, I don't have it in front of me, but a certain amount of funds to the district because that person is hired directly by Quarry Valley. And
91,000.
So we incur the expense in Quarry Valley, and then the SU gives Quarry Valley $91,000 to cover those expenses.
So a motion would be in order to authorize me to sign the sub-grant agreement.
Make the motion.
Second,
A second?
motion by Jim, seconded by Gail. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. So the next meeting is December 16th. I guess at this point, we will have, we'll continue to focus the meetings around the budget unless something else pressing comes up. You good with that? Did you want to speak to us in executive session, Louis, about
Just
the
for a
budget?
brief couple minutes.
Okay.
I also just want to point out too, this Wednesday, November 20th, will be the second reading of the SU budget, and we will be looking for approval so that we have final numbers to put into your local budgets. So I encourage, whether you're a representative or not, if you want to know more about the SU budget and how that process works, that'll be this Wednesday.
How much
And
is that budget?
Here, that meeting will be here
How much
also.
is it up?
Yeah.
There's two pieces. The general fund budget. The general fund budget is up by $292,000. And there are a couple new technology positions built into that. And there's also the piece that I mentioned earlier, the Infinite Campus, jump rope, alpine, maps, all of those are built into the SU budget. That's about $50,000 to $60,000, as well as SUPD. So that's increasing the SU budget, but on the other hand, it's lowering your local budgets. VSBA dues is in that. And then the other piece is the special ed.
So maybe you want to just speak to that, Louis. I mean, Seth and I were at the meeting, but it might be interesting just,
I can hit a few of the highlights.
sure.
Sure.
So before
as
you
I
start,
mentioned,
Louis, do we need the principals for executive session?
No.
Okay. If you'd like to leave and you don't want to listen to Louis, you're more than welcome.
At least not right now.
It's a loaded proposal.
I'd
Run.
like to hear about it.
Okay, I just wanted to give you that option.
The
All right.
Okay, so as I mentioned, the SU budget's separated into two major components. Is the general fund, which is any regular ed expense, and then there's the special ed, which is managed completely separate. It's assessed differently. The general fund is assessed based on ADM, so which is your total student count. It's not enrollment. It's the ADM is taken in the first 20 days of the school year. It's a statewide count. We use last year's ADM for this year's assessment, only because this year's ADM is not available yet. So the major things in the general fund budget that were up that make up that 292,000. Same things that are hitting your Quarry Valley budget. There's salary increases and health insurance increases. There's 2 new technician positions in the budget, totaling 130,000. Those are positions that are going to the schools, troubleshooting issues with computers, setting up new Chromebooks, setting up smart boards, helping teachers with any issues that they have related to technology. The grant writer position is still in the SU budget. That's something that was discussed briefly at the last meeting. I'm sure it'll be another topic of discussion as to whether to keep that position in the budget. That's approximately $65,000.
Was that advertised?
It has been advertised. There's been some applicants. I don't know if you want to talk about that
Sure.
at all, Judy.
We have 3 applicants that we would like to interview, but we can't interview them till next Monday. That's what they're being scheduled for.
One of the recommendations at the SU budget with respect to the grant writer position, I will say personally, I felt like at the SU level, that position seemed like a savings account for the SU. They knew there was money there, and it was like, oh, we need to do X, we'll take $5,000 from the grant writer position, or we'll take, maybe it was more than that. There was a suggestion to perhaps lower that and hire someone, at a straight, I don't know,
On a consultant basis.
on a consultant basis.
as a portion of
Rather
each
than,
grant.
at the level that we were at. It doesn't seem, in my opinion, fiscally responsible to carry that position again as an open position and continually look at that as a savings plan for the SU budget. And I don't think that's good budgeting.
What kind of grants are you wanting them to write?
So the thought was that there are lots of grants out there, and if you had someone on staff, the possibility to write, any number of grants. At the time, Adam was writing grants. We don't really have anyone dedicated to doing that, which inhibits our ability to receiving. And you see some schools that receive, huge for whether it's for construction or new initiatives or, books, furniture in the library. There's just a variety of things.
A lot of times teachers write them.
Yeah, I think the focus would be on large competitive
Large,
type
big.
grants.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
entitlement, it wouldn't be the entitlement grants like
Oh,
we
no,
receive,
no,
such as
no.
Title and IDB. We received, I think approximately $1.8 million in federal funds last year. We're estimated to receive about $2.5 million in federal funds this year. Those funds are all managed by our current existing administrators at central office, being me, Christine Cam, Greg helped out with the technology and security grant one, and then Lisa handles all of the title grants and anything that's
Yeah, it
goes
would
through
be
the title
grants
funding.
outside that scope.
So, yeah, and so it would be any competitive grants that the schools may be interested in, or the SU.
And the principals often write grants. We've had a number of those
But I
too,
mean,
so.
we're writing like 5,000,
Small ones.
Right.
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
helps, but it's not
Yeah,
like
so
a
the
Not like
thought
a
at the
$50,000
yeah.
grant or something
At the
like
SU
that.
level, eyes wide open, they were like, you're writing for 300,000, those kinds of,
Right.
like that, so, but, anyway.
There's no way that a school district or SU could share a position like that with a municipality.
I don't know.
You'd have to have a municipality that writes grants.
Yeah,
Right. But,
Think of ours.
no,
yeah, Polney is talking about looking at someone, but
oh,
the amount of money that's available is not
right,
probably gonna attract
Right, and I mean, I think the initial focus, the reason for it was, a good idea, to take away from, everyone writing, everybody has enough on their plates, and kind of centralize it, other than the federal grants, to one person. So, and also so there was a level of equity amongst the schools, because you may have someone in West Rutland that's fabulous at writing grants, and they may be getting thousands and thousands of dollars, and maybe in Pulteney, they just don't have the time to do that. So having someone at the SU level was supposed to also have a level of equity, so.
And part of it is the research for the grants. I mean,
That
Sure.
the
takes-
grants I write, I get an email saying, hey, there's this
Fill
grant,
out
please
this
apply
form.
for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
because we don't have time to sit there and
Right.
do the
It's
research and
something
find
on
what's
a
out there.
part-time basis and make it so many hours. even.
Exactly.
Right.
Not to exceed, because you don't want to say, oh, it's, 0.2, it's only one day a week, because if a grant is due,
You
it
have
could
to
be
do it.
lots of hours at
Mhm.
once,
Right.
and then
Right.
it tapers off, so that's something to consider. And the other consideration that I just want to put out there is, and because I had this personal experience, I once worked in a district where we had a grant writer and was doing a great job getting all these grants, but with grants comes reporting.
Yep.
And you have obligations, things that you have to do. And it was being given to teachers and administrators to collect the data. They had to do this, they had to do that. And it ended up a little bit taking away,
Yeah, and
taking away
yeah.
from their teaching. So you have
It's
to
like
go
having
in with
another
your
job.
eyes open.
Yeah, and I don't
about
think that
those-
conversation has been fully fleshed out, in my opinion.
Right.
At the SU level, it's just like, oh, we could get a grant for $300,000, and there's been no conversation about what
Who's gonna
that
manage it?
means.
Grants are fine too, but they also have to be sustainable.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
they're not.
As we see in this budget, and everything's falling off and falls back on the local
And you have to
plate.
give a lot of assurances, and then the teachers have to do it, and then the teachers are like, I have to do
So I'm
what?
sure Wednesday night, it will be a,
Well, just so everyone knows,
interesting conversation.
I will be there because Seth will be out of town, so I don't.
Okay. Well, it'll probably be calmer then if Seth isn't there.
Seth has been so quiet tonight.
Oh, you should see him at SU meetings.
It's just a
wild.
whole nother story.
Oh, I gotta go just for entertainment value.
All right.
Quarry Valley covers about 55% of the assessment for the GRCSU for general ed. And that's, again, based on ADM. It's slightly up from last year. Last year we were at 54.91, this year we're at 55.62, and that's because of an increase in ADM. ADM as a total went from 1819 to 1832, so we are seeing an increase, and that's based on enrollment to some degree. On the special ed side, that budget was up as well. On special ed, Quarry Valley pays approximately 60% of the SU assessment. It's down slightly from last year. You were at 60.82. This year at 60.64. So not a major impact. But the budget as a total is the assessment. The assessment is up by 518,000. There's a few things in here. There's the same things that are hitting the general fund budget. There's a raise, salary increases, there's health insurance. There's also, we're up approximately 20 IEP students this year compared to last year, and with each one that we're up, that comes new needs, one-on-ones, and whatever, special educators. There's only one new position over what we actually have now, and that's the IEP for preschool students. So we had one case manager this year. We're moving that to 2, so that we have one for the north schools, one for the south schools. That's the only new position, other than, I'm gonna go into another thing in a minute, but that's the only other position. We do have several positions, actually, probably about 8 or 9 positions that are positions that were added after last year's budget was approved, but those positions are currently in place, and that's, they're mostly para positions that were needed based on IEP needs for either one-on-ones or shared IEP needs. So there are about 9 or 10 positions that are increased over budget, but a lot of those positions are already in place as of right now. The other thing that's in here is an alternative special ed program, and that is for, I'm not going to go into too great of detail. There's going to be a very lengthy discussion, I'm sure, at the SU meeting about this, but it focuses on middle school to high school students, and it's creating our own special ed program to fit the needs of those students. Currently, there's not a lot out there for opportunities for these type of programs. These are not students that we would have in our current programs in our current high schools. They're students that we're sending to either a VAC or a Lehigh, and so we're paying a large cost to send them to private programs. And so the idea is to bring those in-house, to create more opportunities because of the lack of programs that are out there, but also hopefully in the long run create a better placements for our students and maybe save some money down in the long run. So there are several positions that are in the budget related to starting that program, as well as we talked about a space. There was a lot of question at the last SU meeting regarding that, and Christine will be at the meeting on Wednesday to provide further information and possibly move in a different direction. So.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Louis?
Thanks, Louis.
All right, thank you. I guess with that, we would take a motion to move into executive session for personnel.
I will make a motion to move into an executive session to discuss personnel.
I'll second.
So motion by Seth, seconded by Kristen R.
Yeah, I did.
All those
I
in
was
favor?
impressed.
Aye.
At 7:07 PM.
You're fading, Sarah.
Great.